No, as Bob said, sorry, I will not answer questions which are related to the Doha round. I have a session with the whole membership on Tuesday, and I have to talk to the membership before I talk to you. But for the rest, any question?
Okay, please.
Hi, there are huge protests today in London, and
Could you give your name and
Gabrielle Steinhauser from the Associated Press. There are huge protests today in London, and there were protests here in Brussels just a few days ago against austerity measures, and people worried about cuts to their social system. Do you think that protests like that have any impact on what is happening at the G20 level, or are policymakers so far removed from the people on the street?
You promised to take all the non-trade with us.
I mean, look, the fact that this economic crisis had a social impact which is having a political impact is, I don't think anybody should be surprised by this. That's the lesson of history. Each time there has been a big shock of this kind, this has resulted in political turbulences, some from my perspective in the right direction, some from my perspective in the wrong direction. Look at the lessons of history, and it's a question of personal judgment. So we should not be surprised by this. And this will keep going on as long as levels of unemployment and social discontent will remain what they are. And of course, if you have to run rebalancing programs, if you have to reduce your public expenditure, if you have to make sure that markets will not totally downgrade you, you have to take a number of measures of reforms which are politically and socially extremely painful. Now, if there's another solution, then addressing these issues, fine. I think for the moment, a number of these countries have no other choice than going through this painful period, which in a way pays for credit-driven, more happy periods in the past.
The countries you mentioned are democracies. So, of course, people have a right of association, they have a right of speech. That's a normal part of the democratic process. And if you ask whether politicians listen and pay attention to them, of course they do, because they have to be elected at the end of the day. Now, they also have to figure out how to respond to a multiplicity of different perspectives and steps today that may be difficult, as Pascal said, but are important for the long run. And we mentioned London. I think in Britain there is a view that I frankly am very sympathetic with, that given the risks of the debt posture, they had to demonstrate reestablishing their fiscal solidity. It won't be easy, and I think everybody has an empathy for the people that are going through these difficult times. I think the more interesting question is the demonstrations in the non-democratic countries. I mean, so what we've really seen this year is the fact that people are willing to go to the street and protest where they don't have a voice and they don't have a say. And I think one of the greater challenges now of this period will be how will these governments respond in different ways to allow and to engage people into overall economic as well as political process.
Jakob Nielsen from Danish newspaper Politiken. Now, just this week, the Euro countries and some other EU members made an agreement on how to focus more on keeping down debt deficits and manage debt. Now, I'd like to ask both of you if you think enough is being done in the US to keep down the deficit and to manage the debt problems that are present in the US economy. Thank you.
Want me to start here? Okay. No. And I think that this is the way that a democratic process under the U.S. Constitution, where you have powers separated with the president and between different branches of Congress, is working its way towards something. I hope that they do come together and act on it, because I think that the United States also faces an issue of too much government spending, too much debt that's been built up. President Obama appointed a commission that came up with a series of solutions. You had one of the senators here, Senator Warner from Virginia, who's tried to put together a bipartisan group to try to advance those steps. I think that's very important. In the United States, as in any political system, the debate focuses on the near-term issue. So the debate is focused on the annual spending bills, which weren't passed by the prior Congress, and now they've had a series of extensions. But that, as you probably know, is a rather small part. That's called the discretionary spending. The larger amounts deal with what is the entitlement spending. And so I think those are an issue that the United States is going to have to address. The United States has a very strong financial posture globally that's been earned over 220 years of hard work, but people shouldn't take that for granted, whether it reflects the ability to borrow at certain rates or the currency. So I do think that's something the U.S. has to address. And I listened to Senator Warner's comments with interest, is because he was making the point that in a political and constitutional system, it may take years or it may take a year, and he's pushing for this year, which I think is a good thing.
Lawrence Norman from Dow Jones. Let me try something that spins off Doha but is not directly Doha related. If there isn't a breakthrough in the next few months, what is the best way forward on trade in your view now? Is it to carry on pushing for some kind of global trade deal, or might it be to take a different approach, to scale back ambitions, something along those lines?
Well, we are not yet there. And given the viscosity of this international system, given the complexities of the negotiations, what members in WTO have decided is to work on Plan A before working on Plan B. And as you know, even the construction of Plan A at the time took probably between 2 and 4 years before we started the negotiation. So intellectually, I mean, I agree a lot with those who say, if Plan A doesn't work, why keep digging? Why not think about the Plan B? It's a perfectly rational and correct reasoning. If we need 2 or 3 years to build Plan B, better try and finish Plan A.
Last room.
Let me add something to this so you have a sense of some of the interconnections. Pascal was in the U.S., I guess it was a week or so ago, and we both took part in an event with the Chamber of Commerce of the United States, bringing together business groups, trying to focus on trade facilitation and also the capacity building. So this is neither Plan A nor B, but it could be of help under any circumstance. There are huge gains to be had in trying to remove the non-formal border barriers. So the cost of custom systems, the ability to interconnect infrastructure and ports more effectively, trade finance. So I think I want to compliment Pascal because he's driven this agenda in a way that is not only complementary to the Doha trade negotiations, but could actually be supportive in that even if you remove formal barriers, for many, particularly in the developing world, unless they can address some of these other issues, they won't be able to take full advantage. And one of the things that we've seen is that by drawing in everything from export credit agencies, which is another group that we met with while there from around the world, developed and developing, to the private business sector, you can really turbocharge the benefits of the trade reduction. And Pascal has had a series of meetings regionally, but then he brings them together globally on aid for trade, and I think you've got one this July in Geneva too, to try to emphasize that dimension.
let's take one last question.
I am Ahmed Khalil, a journalist from Egypt. I ask about are the gas and oil play a great role in the policy between USA and EU with the Arab regimes like Saudi Arabia and the Gulf region? And another question, how the EU and the United Kingdom and USA can help countries like Egypt and Tunisia and other countries have a revolution lately. Thank you.
Well, on the trade side, when you look at this region, I mean, let's say the whole of the Mediterranean basin, Maghreb, Mashrek, and then up north to Turkey, if you look at trade flows, there is one striking thing, which is that they remain mostly north-south. So I personally believe US, EU could probably do a bit more in opening their trade with the countries in this region as they've been doing it during the last 20 years. But my own personal view, and I've shared this view with a number of my Egyptians or Tunisians friends or even Moroccan friends recently, is that what's missing is economic and trade regional integration. That's what's missing in this region. And if you look at the small steps that have been taken in the past, such as the Agadir free trade arrangement between Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan, which in a way Turkey has now joined, it has created a lot of pluses. And there is ample space for more regional integration. And of course, Egypt, as the elephant in the system, has a role to play, which my hope is that it will play in the future.
What's striking, if you look at the aggregate trade statistics of the broader Middle East or Middle East and North Africa, is how under-integrated it is with the global economy other than energy. And just to give you one reference point that I found striking, South Korea has a population of about 60 million people. Egypt has a population of about 80 million people. South Korea's manufacturing exports in 1 week exceed what Egypt's are for a whole year. Now, this is a caution for us as we go forward, because what I just talked about in the other room is, I think the events in the broader Middle East and North Africa are some of the momentous events of our time. But there's obviously still huge uncertainties, and the process will wend its way in different countries in different ways. I think we need to have an international effort focused on support in a short, medium, and long term. Short term, I'm concerned about rising food prices and the stress it could put on countries such as Egypt, which import a lot of its wheat, or Tunisia. But at the same time, we need to try to work with developing governments to see what examples others have used around the world to have more effective support programs. Because if you just increase everybody's wages and increase the current subsidy program, which provides bread to 85% of the people, you'll blow a hole in your budget. Second, I do think there's going to be a crying need for short-term job creation. But again, we've seen elsewhere in the world there's ways you can do this without inhibiting the development of the private sector, depending on the wages and how you design the programs. That's going to be important. Third, I do think at the same time we need to try to work with the governments to create additional opportunities for the private sector. You have very bloated public sectors if you compare those economies, not just with Europe or the United States, but say in East or South Asia. And remember, it was a Tunisian street vendor who was being hassled that set all this off. So can't we create additional opportunities for entrepreneurs and small business people? The fourth, however, is we need to try to capture this question about demonstrations, people in the street, and link it to the economy, where sometimes those two are in tension. And this is through social accountability of what governments do, the transparency, the anti-corruption. How can we connect that energy to government policies? So my own view is this is going to need to be one of the big issues, whether it's done in a G20, whether it's something that France takes on in the G8, whatever combination. At the World Bank, we're deeply engaged with this process. At the same time, we have to recognize that this is not going to be a straight line. We're still in the midst of huge turmoil, but with the right support, I hope we can create an opportunity. Last point is the one that Pascal mentioned, is at the World Bank, we've done a lot of analytical work with the countries in the region to try to encourage sub-regional integration. And frankly, the politics, say, for example, in the Maghreb, has still blocked it. So maybe we can create some additional opportunities here with some of the political changes so that you can integrate some of the region. But at the same time, I think part of the challenge will be for some of the developed economies to help create a better investment environment, perhaps to look at some of their policies, whether Pascal tried to do this when he was European Commissioner, or I tried to do it as trade representative, not only to perhaps open the markets, but maybe relooking at some of the rule of origin issues, maybe considering how you can support the food exports with product safety support and other aspects. And these are not immediate, but they're going to be the medium and long term to really give these countries a chance to integrate more deeply in the global economy.
Okay, thanks for your attention.